Welcome to Still Plays Galaxy of Heroes. We are back with our 6th man list part 2. Again, the premise of this list is in basketball you have your starting 5 and then you have your 6th man who's the first guy off the bench. Usually they aren't as good of an all-around player, but they still contribute something, and that's how we are looking at these factions in Galaxy of Heroes. For the most part, we know which characters are worth working on in each faction, but sometimes it's worth working on one or two extra. We are looking at those characters. With this list, we've been working mostly alphabetically with a little bit of jumping around. So look at part 1 for the first half of the alphabet. We are going to start off this list with the Jedi. We are going to throw out the first 15 because between the Jedi, the Galactic Republic, Old Republic, there's plenty of teams now to hold 3 good 5-man deep Jedi teams. So we are going to start looking at this list after Barriss. Barriss was thrown in with the Galactic Republic list. So looking at Qui-Gon, Mace, Imagundai, Plo, Consular, Sakura, and through the rest of these guys. Qui-Gon gives us a called assist, a dispel. He's relatively speaking a decent attacker, used to be a good leader, and he's a candidate for someone who's going to be needed for relics for Jedi Master Kenobi. And for Kenobi, we already know Mace Windu needs to be relicked. He's a tank with more of an attacker's kit, but he's not great. He's been a long time candidate for a touch-up or a rework. Imagundai, he has a leadership that I actually kind of like, where he is countering a lot. He is not an awful Jedi leader, and he was actually one of the characters I got for free from Bronziums when they did that at the start of new accounts several years ago. And I ran with Imagundai for a long time at the start of the game when I had no idea what I was doing. Plo Koon, he has a nice ability here in Take Charge where he adds a bunch of turn meter to Jedi and Clone, and other characters gain half. That is a nice little thing to pull off the bench and give the team a bunch of speed. Jedi Consular, he is a healer with a little bit of attacking. Ayla has some nice functionality. Ayla with her basic, she calls an assist. If they're a Jedi, they deal more damage. And on top of that, if she critically hits, then she lands a stun. That is very powerful, very nice. Kanan, you need to start at the beginning of the game. He is a pilot. We are not considering ships as part of this calculation, but he can taunt, he can dispel a target, and he can dispel himself. He is, for a Jedi tank, he's one of the better ones. We've got Kit Fisto. He's not under consideration unless he gets a rework. And actually, honestly, we're not going to pretend the rest of these Jedi shouldn't really be considered. Luminara gives you another healer. She was only nice at the beginning of the game. And it really, healers at the beginning of the game, you were fooled into thinking they were more useful than they were. Koth and Juhani. Juhani I am not a fan of. I'm so glad that I went the Canderous route and not the Juhani route. Even though Canderous technically I think takes more gear, Juhani just offers nothing. But for me, the 6th man award winner goes to Ayla. Those called assists are great. That stun, I love control in a kit. Ayla is a Jedi that I've been wanting to add to my teams for a long time. With the Mandalorians, we don't really have a starting 5. We're going to eliminate Jango Fett and the Mandalorian, their bounty hunters, Jango being flexed with the Separatist. Beskar Mando, it's still a little unclear if he's better served by the Mandalorian show characters or by the Mandalorian faction itself. Then if we look at who's remaining, we've got the Armorer, Canderous, Bo. They're our go-to starting 3. We can throw in Mando or Beskar Mando to be the 4th unit, but then we have 3 characters for that 5th slot. So really here we're going to look at the 5th man because it's unclear who the starting 5 would be. So Gar Saxon, Sabine, and Imperial Super Commando. If you've been watching my Grand Arena videos, you've seen me use Gar Saxon with some interesting kit functionality where theoretically this all works, where you do Bo-Katan lead, you have the armor, you get the 3 stacks of Beskar onto Bo, and then when she taunts, that's a guaranteed counter from her. With Gar Saxon off of his unique, if an ally is attacking during an enemy turn, basically meaning countering, then Gar Saxon is guaranteed to assist. And that works great. I've been using it, but there's a problem. He's a tank. He doesn't do a lot of damage. So with all those assisted attacks, Gar Saxon isn't really packing a punch. Sabine offers an armor shred, an AoE, and she is a decent attacker. Armor shred works great with the armor, makes it easier for the armor to get those stacks of Beskar. The AoE also inflicts exposes and stagger, and I love control in a kit, and the exposes boost the damage. Now with Imperial Super Commando, has a basic with a turn meter condition that allows him to attack again. He has a high chance to counter, and he has a dispel with his special. And honestly, I don't think the 6th man or 5th man in this case exists in the game yet. I think we've got another Mandalorian coming. We're going to see something else. For the time being, I have to give it to Sabine. I wish I could give it to Gar Saxon. I like the kid interaction, but it's just not there from a damage standpoint, and there needs to be more damage in this faction, and Sabine gives some of it, and by that armor shred helps out a lot by getting the armor to those stacks faster, because the armor is slow. It's hard to get those stacks of Beskar and then put those on to the rest of the team. Anything to help the armorer get those stacks faster is going to help out the Mandalorian faction as a whole. On top of that, the control that Sabine gives with those stagger is going to help prolong the Mandalorian faction to stay alive. Next we are doing the Rebel faction. Night Sisters we did in part 1, Old Republic we're skipping. Once you eliminate the Jedi, there's a clear starting 5 plus 1. Now with the Rebel faction, what's nice is it's very clear who the starting 5 Rebels are right now with CLS, Han, Chewie, Chupio, and C-3PO. We're going to take out the Phoenix, we're taking out the Rebel fighters from consideration. So we're just looking at these characters that we have favorited here. Captain Han gives a nice heal and a revive to a Rebel squad. Rolo in 3v3 I'll use as a leader from time to time when I'm taking CLS away for a Chupio team. Han and Chewie, I'll give Rolo. She also has a nice AoE. Princess Leia has a stealth, that really nice multi-attack. She does some big damage, and then with her Zeta, that gives her a nice little heal. It's not one I've put on, but it's really not a bad Zeta. Fulcrum, can't land debuffs on her. She also does some big damage under certain conditions. She's also a fringe character for a potential touch-up or rework in the future. I think CG always wanted her to be better than she actually is. Akbar, another decent leader under certain conditions. If you pair him up with a team that does a bunch of support abilities without attacks, Akbar is a very nice leader to those kinds of squads. Stormtrooper Han, nice little rebel tank that adds turn meter and removes enemy turn meter. Farm Boy Luke is a nice sneaky leader to add to like a Nest solo or undersize or a Wampa undersize. I'll use him fairly frequently in Grand Arena. That's a nice little leadership that adds a bunch of tenacity to a Nest or a Wampa so that a daze can't get landed on them, and you can make sure that those solos don't get interrupted. Lobot, just a shout out to Urz for this one, he's no good. 6th man for the Rebel faction, his character I still need to work on, it's Stormtrooper Han. His taunt, whenever he is taking damage, he is giving turn meter to his allies. And then from his unique, on top of the turn meter he's giving out, he's also removing turn meter from the enemy. His Zeta is not a bad one, where he is also going to recover protection when he takes damage, making him even tankier. That is some nice functionality to add to a team. And Theory Crafters have done some interesting things with Stormtrooper Han in the past. He's a nice character to throw in after you've taken care of some of the clear starters in the Rebel faction. So your Rebel Fighters under Mon Mothma is another faction without a clear starting 5. So what you usually see is you'll see Biggs and Wedge, sometimes Lando, but only because they are needed at relics for other reasons. So people just throw in the relic characters. You'll also see Pow, Hoth Rebel Scout, because they add a bunch of turn meter manipulation to the squad. And then Zareth has found an interesting team that can somewhat reliably handle Grievous under certain conditions with Cassian, K2SO, and Cara Dune. So we're going to eliminate them from consideration for the starting unit because there has been specific use cases for those characters. So we're going to be looking at Chirrut, Baze, Scarif Rebel Pathfinder, Jin, Bodhi, and the Hoth Rebel Soldier for that last slot. And Bistan, I don't think we said Bistan. So Frenzy is a nice little ability here where he gains 100% turn meter when allies are using specials, meaning he is going frequently under this type of squad. Jin, we are not considering the Rogue One as a faction anymore because they've basically been cannibalized by Mon Mothma. But what she has here is this nice ability, Truncheon Strike, that I really like. Removes all turn meter and has a chance to stun if she critically hits. And she's a nice character. If you have to go deep into your roster in Grand Arena for some reason, you can pull her in, remove that turn meter, pair her with some other characters that do some damage, and she is a nice cleanup character in Grand Arena. Scarif Rebel Pathfinder, I've tried throwing into Mon Mothma teams because he has a nice revive. I already have him geared up because of Bistan's U-Wing, and he can taunt, and having those multiple taunts with a Mon Mothma squad is very helpful. Now Baze, another taunting tank, he has 2 dispels, which are really nice. Chirrut has a heal, but he's more of an attacker, and he spreads some nice buffs around. We're not going to pretend with Bodhi. And Hoth Rebel Soldier, he taunts and gives a bunch of defense. But for me, the 6th man for a Rebel Fighters, it's Chirrut. The heal is one thing, but really it's about the tenacity up that he gives the field, because what that tenacity up does is it makes Jango counter much harder to deal with because Jango can't land the debuffs to get his contract going, and it makes it so Jawas can't counter Mon Mothma because when that tenacity up, they're not landing those thermals. Otherwise, Mon Mothma is vulnerable to Jawas just like the Geos are. And because he's actually more of an attacker technically than a healer, he lands some big damage for a character that has a really nice heal. So the Sith Empire faction, you got your Revan, Malak, Shan, HK-47. We're really talking about that 5th slot. And really I want to make this a PSA about not over-investing in these in any faction because every meta expires. So what you really want is a Relic Sith Marauder because Sith Marauder can one-shot characters at relics. Sith Empire Trooper, whether he's relic or not, never affected a Darth Revan mirror. And if you have to deal with a Darth Revan team, that Sith Empire Trooper is never affecting whether or not you are winning or losing that match. So don't overinvest in these factions. Sith Empire Trooper, you'll slot him in. Sith Marauder is the clear go-to. Sith Assassin, we are going to consider as part of the Sith faction. For the purposes of our list video, we are eliminating the Sith Empire. Palpatine, Vader, they're out. Dooku's part of the Separatists. Sith Trooper is part of the First Order. So we are looking at the Sith Triumvirate plus a couple. And we will discuss the key ones. So we've got Savage here. Savage, this is all about Overpower. Overpower is a really nice clean up attack. Darth Maul has a bunch of evasion. He applies an AoE daze, which is always a nice ability. Darth Sidious applies some nice debuffs, has healing immunity on the basic, has an AoE with expose and damage over time. And Sith Assassin's really about this nice ability here, Dark Shroud, which gives turn meter to all Sith allies. Sixth man has got to be SWGOH in this case. Usually doing an undersized squad. Sometimes I'll throw in Sith Marauder because Sith Marauder gains a bunch of turn meter himself. But Overpower is just too nice of a cleanup ability for SWGOH to not be the sixth man for this squad. I wish the Zeta was better. This used to be a very annoying Zeta a long time ago in the game. There's some potential here with a little tweak to make him like a poor man's nest. I'd love it if SWGOH could gain that kind of viability. Smuggler faction we're not going to treat as a faction. We're going to treat them as sixth man characters in general, because what you usually see, how they're usually employed, is they're being plugged into other teams and other factions for their own viability. One thing you'll see is a hybrid smuggler Old Republic team that has some nice viability. So the characters that are really nice from this faction, because I think this faction gets a little bit ignored, even I've ignored them to a certain extent, but they have some nice interactions. So you have Vandor Chewie has a really nice Zeta with a guaranteed revive if he has full protection of reviving scoundrel allies, or light side scoundrel allies. Kira is just a really nice scoundrel leader where she gives ramping damage. You'll pair her with Nest. Nest will do some big damage. I've paired her in 3v3 with IG-11 and Quill, and with their interaction of heals and dispels, they become very dangerous with how their damage starts ramping up. And then L3 is a nice droid smuggler scoundrel that you can plug into scoundrel and droid lineups, and she'll start cleansing debuffs and has a very annoying persisting taunt. That is part 2 of the 6th man list. If you missed the first part, I'm putting it right here. Thank you for watching. Be safe out there, everyone, and be excellent to each other.